Welcome to Adjusted Reality, a podcast series trusted by the adjusted and brought to you by the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, where we learn from athletes, celebrities, influencers, and healthcare professionals about how to optimize health in a fun, relatable way. Join me, Dr. Sherry McAllister, as I speak with Dr. Heidi Haavik about artificial intelligence and the impact it has on our health. We are absolutely thrilled to bring back Dr. Haavik this season. And if you missed any previous episodes, be sure to click the link in the show notes to tune in. Dr. Heidi Haavik is the Director of Research at the New Zealand College of Chiropractic. She is a chiropractor and has a PhD in human neurophysiology from the University of Auckland. And she is the author of the best-selling book, The Reality Check, a quest to understand chiropractic from the inside out. And she runs a company with the mission of enlightening the world about the science of chiropractic. Welcome back, Dr. Haavik. How are you?
Thanks, Sherry. It's lovely to be back. I really enjoy talking to you.
You know,
I've actually been promoted. I'm vice president of research these days.
Outstanding. Well, I stand corrected now. You are the vice president. That is exciting news. But, you know, the one thing that our listeners have always come back to us and say, your material is so relevant and it's so pertinent to today's world. And that's why we love having you as a guest, because you're on the cutting edge. So congratulations for the update, and delighted to have you back. And we've got a really hot topic today. So for our listeners, this is up and coming new and exciting moment for you to kind of dive into this very special place, and that is the artificial intelligence. So Heidi, first tell our audience, what is artificial intelligence? And then can you kind of give them, because a lot of people have questions about what's the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning?
Right. Well, that's the key thing there is the research that we're doing, it's not just cutting edge in the neuroscience world or in the chiropractic world or understanding the science of the spine world, but we are also cutting edge when it comes to technology. And this has been a really interesting journey for me. I am not a bioengineer. I am not an expert on AI. So my explanations for today, big, what's it called? Warning. This is
your disclaimer, Dr. Heidi.
Disclaimer, I am not a bioengineer. I am not an AI expert, but we use it within our research team. And so simply the way I understand machine learning and AI is machine learning. You tell the machine what you want it to pick out. So, for example, in many of our studies in the past, we found this one somatosensory potential peak. Now, don't panic. That's a very long word for what turns out to be a squiggle on a piece of paper, right? So we record these brain waves from the brain. They look like little squiggles, but they're at a certain particular millisecond time after we've stimulated the wrist. So, for example, we kept finding this one squiggle called the N30 because it happens, the squiggle goes up at about 30 milliseconds after we stimulate the wrist, and then it comes back down again. In other studies, we found that to happen within the prefrontal cortex of the brain, and we've talked quite a bit about that prefrontal cortex and why that's so exciting. But what I'm trying to get at here is what we can use now with machine learning is we can get these machines, we can tell them what to look for. So you're looking for this particular squiggle that goes up at about 30 milliseconds after stimulation, and it can learn to extract it. Now, why might this be really, really important? Well, I'll tell you why. For my PhD research, when I first did the first somatosensory evoked potential study, Sherry, I spent 6 months picking screen by screen through 7 channels of EEG to analyze and then move my cursors to get when it starts, when it's at its peak, what's the difference in height. I mean, it's 6 months to extract from those 7 channels. we now have 64 channels of EEG we can record from the whole head. And with things like the machine learning, and if you've trained it to pick this particular peak, it can do it within minutes from 64 channels as opposed to my 6 months. So the way you can extract information with these machines is incredible. Now, artificial intelligence is a bit different. With artificial intelligence, we don't tell it anything. We just blast it with all this data, and it can be thousands, if not millions of data points. And the machine itself, the computer, picks out patterns. So you can kind of learn brand new connections that we haven't necessarily even thought of. And for example, you can give a whole lot of data from, say, people that have got dysfunctional spines and compare it with people that have got healthy spines. And then we can start to ask the machine, well, can you find differences between this data set and that data set? And all of a sudden it starts to pick out, yep, this is different and this is different and this is different in the people that have got dysfunctional spines. So it's a really, really cool, powerful tool to start to find patterns that would normally take us like 10 years to discover if we just look bit by bit by bit by bit. Does that make sense?
That is actually really exciting. And you kind of look back thinking, okay, machine intelligence, I just spent 6 months of my life in doing, and now it's like a dot on a very small page of your life. But it does promote how exciting the future is going to be, because there's things we don't even know. And like you said, when you get to artificial intelligence, it starts to begin a whole new world of things that we never even saw correlation to, that
Exactly.
we could be looking at. And that's where I wanted to ask you. So as you see artificial intelligence, and it's currently starting to grow, and it's growing faster than we actually ever thought possible, which is why we're having this conversation today, is,
Yes.
I mean, we're on the exponential train speed that's possible for movement in science. Faster probably than the last 200 years will be the next 6 months. That's how fast artificial intelligence can be implemented and used.
Yeah.
But we're particularly talking about the healthcare industry. So
Yes.
where do you see artificial intelligence currently being used in healthcare industry, and maybe potential for the future?
Well, I'm particularly looking at it from a scientific perspective, but and this is something I wanted to get into anyway, was because one thing I really reckon that we'll be able to use AI in the future is literally starting to record from millions of people, because it can start to pick up on patterns, you see. So if you've got millions of people and lots of inputs are coming in about those people, because this is where other technology can be really interesting as well, Sherry, where you get this wearable technology like Fitbits or Oura Rings or, iWatches, where you can start to pick up on heart rate variability, you can pick up on sleep stages, on movement, where you can also start to put in input from the patients themselves or from the people themselves. You could potentially also start to put in what sort of interventions, healthcare interventions, are they seeking? So are they seeing a physiotherapist? Are they seeing a chiropractor? Are they seeing surgeons? What medication are they taking? You start to put in all of this. Are they on opioids? Are they on, Voltaren? What kind of medications are they taking? You can then, again, with the machine learning, because you can just give it all this data and it can start to pick up on patterns. So I think in the future, what we're going to find, and I think it's going to happen real fast, like you're saying,
right,
we will be able to know, okay, so I'm a 49-year-old woman, I have these symptoms, and I reckon the AI is going to start to tell us, well, in your situation with your symptoms, your gender, where you are in the world, what's the best kind of healthcare options for you moving forward. So it will then know that, okay, you need to exercise a bit more, you'll need to cut down a little bit on your alcohol intake. There's even patches now that can pick up on glucose metabolism. We're starting to look at the insulin resistance, metabolic disorders. These things are coming into wearable technology. And again, we know some of these big factors, but we know how important exercise is, mindfulness, meditation. We know now, we're starting to understand the importance of your spinal function. I mean, I say my mission's on enlightening the world about the science of chiropractic, but it's not really. It's actually enlightening the world about the science of the spine, the secrets of the spine, because most people have no idea how important their spine is for proper brain function and therefore proper health function. And this is where I see the biggest reward in our healthcare with AI. I think the power will be given back to the people. So you will know yourself whether the kind of healthcare regime that you're currently under, is it working for you? Are you moving towards health, or are you on a slippery slide towards more disease and disorders? That's where I see the real future lying.
So Heidi, it kind of makes me think back to when you said that. You can tell teenagers pretty much 100 times and 99.9 times they're not going to listen. So you can tell them, you can say, thinking in the future is, here is your Heidi artificial intelligence iWatch, and she's going to tell you that your prognosis is X, and teenager, the path that you're on, if you don't switch paths, is going to lead you to Y. And I'm hoping, I really hope that that when you can see what that path Y looks like, you can start to identify with, well, I don't really want that, because a lot of us make choices when we start to see the outcomes. And an example being, jumping in a squirrel suit and jumping off a mountain sounds glorious and super fun to me. But then you start to look at the outcome measures and how many people actually land those squirrel suits healthily with a healthful attitude. They're healthy and strong. But this is kind of where I think we get back to looking at how our health has impacts and you have control. So bringing it back to the power of the people is really, you're actually going to have the options of changing what you know now, because there's going to be no such thing as, well, I didn't know. Like, I didn't know smoking was bad, and that's why I started. And I didn't know that, if I took this one opiate, I had a 33% chance of being addicted for the rest of my life. Those are things that I think our natural tendency is to look at patterns, because that's what, look at social media. When you start to see a congregation come to one influencer, as an example, people start paying attention to what that influencer says. So artificial intelligence has such a magnificent piece to it. Tell me a little bit about, for you, how have you managed to get into artificial intelligence and start manipulating, for the lack of a better word, the variables that come with artificial intelligence?
Well, it was really interesting, actually, because I back to when I was doing my PhD, and it took me 6 months to analyze all that data, Sherry, and I was like, it was painful, honestly, for 8 hours a day, sitting there moving cursors and writing numbers down. Can you imagine? But that's what I had to do at the time. And then I met this brilliant bioengineer, Imran Kaniatsi. He originally from Pakistan, but had done his master's in Germany, and then he did his PhD in Denmark. And I was in Denmark visiting a girlfriend who was also a neuroscientist. And and another professor friend came from Canada, and we were running this little study. And he was running the equipment. So he was the bioengineer running the equipment, just helping us out for the day. And I remember looking at him, because, again, when you're into brain science, you're really looking at how can you influence the brain? How can you change brain function? It's all about the neural plasticity. How can you cause brain adaptations? And like, for a neuroscientist, it's exciting if you get like a 5% change. It's like, yay. And you could write a paper on that, and it was just like, yay. And he was sitting there with the machinery when we were adjusting the spine again as a chiropractor, just, gently setting up, doing that little thrust, very, specific, low amplitude, high speed. So it's a fast but very gentle thrust into the spine. And he was seeing 300% changes on the computer screen. And you should have seen his jaw was just about on the floor. He kept looking at me and back at the computer screen. I could see it, but I was used to it. You see, I don't know why, but this adjustment, adjusting the spine, is such a powerful gateway into the brain. I can't explain why fully yet, other than maybe it's a natural input. I don't know. But anyway, when we adjust the spine, you get this massive influence. So he literally thought that the electrodes had fallen off. He thought his equipment was malfunctioning, but it sort of happened again and again and again. So then, of course, he comes up and he's, asking me about it, because chiropractic isn't very big in Pakistani. It's not something he'd come across. So we started talking, and he'd actually injured his arm. And so I started to talk to him about his health care. And in the end, I talked him into coming to New Zealand. Long story short, Imran's still with me now. He actually runs our research centre. So we've given all our data at the New Zealand College of Chiropractic, Centre for Chiropractic Research. Basically, the person in charge is a bioengineer, a non-chiropractor. We completely trust the data to the engineers, right? No bias there, And, but anyway, after like several years of Imran working with me, he goes, "Oh, Heidi, I need to go down to Otago. It's down the South Island in New Zealand." And I said, "Sure, but why? Oh, they're setting up an AI department at the university in Otago." And I'm like, "And, so why are you going?" And he sort of just casually goes, "Oh, well, I'm considered one of New Zealand's, if not New Zealand's AI expert." And I'm like, "What?" Wow. He's such a humble man. He's so brilliant. He hadn't even thought to tell me, Sherry, that he is New Zealand's AI expert. I just about died. I'm like,
how fortunate, not only for your school in New Zealand, but for the research that you've been doing, and have that congruency of having someone so close to looking at the database and then being able to identify how artificial intelligence can jump into this. And your passion oozes over. So now
this is growing big time in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So in the last few years now, since discovering this, we've started to do more and more AI type studies. Shall I give you an example?
Yes, please. More than one example.
So we just recently, because of Imran and because of who he is, we usually get, every year we get from Denmark, because of his connections back where he did his PhD, still knows all of the people back there. We get quite a lot of bioengineering students that come and do their master's projects with us, right? Which is wonderful for us, because we get basically people that we don't have to pay to analyze some of our data, which, it's hard to get money for research. So for us, it's fantastic. So we really look after them, and they go travel around New Zealand and have a great time. But anyway, so the last group we had, there was 4 Danish students, bioengineering students, brilliant, smart guys. And they took on the project of looking at, because again, remember with AI, we give it lots of data and we ask, can it pick up on patterns? Right. So what we had another student who was a PhD student from France, again, a bioengineering student, again, a contact of Imran's. I don't know what we would have done without Imran, to be honest. But anyway, so Lucian collected all his data. He had 400 channels of EMG. So the electromyography, you're picking up on the electrical activity from within the muscles of the back, close to the spine. And he had 400 channels. So what you can actually start doing with that is you can start looking deeper into the data and almost start to pick out individual, motor units where they're contracting. But anyway, that's getting a little complicated. Let's bring it back. Okay. So we've got 400 channels of EMG, and he got the people to do lots of different movements. So for example, they bent over forward, they extended their back backwards, they twisted to the left, they twisted to the right, they laterally bent, so they popped their ear straight down to the right, their ear straight down to the left. So they moved the spine in different directions. So what we gave these Danish students is we gave them the 400 channels of EMG, which is recording over time. You can imagine how much data this is. Normally we take one snapshot from 2 electrodes and compare the electrical activity. Here we have 400 channels of ongoing EMG data as they're bending forward and standing back up. And then we literally just ask the machines, again, the AI learning, just What patterns can you find? And can you identify one part of that data set that's different from the others? The reason we asked for that is during Lucien's study, we'd also, the chiropractor that was involved had gone in and noted where in their spine they were dysfunctional, what some chiropractors, I particularly also call it the subluxation, the vertebral subluxation, where you've got that dysfunction. Remember, we talked about it before, where the surrounding little muscles, they atrophy, become stiff and fibrotic. You get increased inflammation, so it's tender to the touch. So we know there's dysfunction that happens, but what we wanted to know, because the chiropractor finds it by assessing the spine, and then we asked the machine, can you pick up on anything from these 400 channels of EMG data when the person is bending forward and standing back up? So first we split it into 4. So we had the upper left, the upper right, the lower left, the lower right. And it would identify spot on the same quadrant where the chiropractor had identified that there was a subluxated segment.
Excellent.
So then they kept splitting it up again and again. And the machine could pick up on and identify down to like a single segmental level, pretty much, I mean, exactly where the chiropractor had identified the subluxation was. So you might wonder, well, why is this interesting? Because, I mean, honestly, when the guys presented this, I was jumping up and down and just about kissing them. I was so excited because it is really interesting when you know then that the electrical activity from an area where it's dysfunctioning in the spine, it's possible to pick that up through machine learning. Because imagine in the future, you might be able to put a strip up your back that really can just pick up on everything that's going on. You might bend and move a little bit, and then the computer will spit out for you, yep, you've got dysfunction here, and here. This is what your chiropractor needs to assess.
How exciting would be. So, Heidi, one of the things that I think we look back in the past and we're starting to gain the relevancy of when you don't fully have all of the scientific research and objective facts, it's hard for people to see because chiropractors have this unique ability. This is what they do 8 to 10 hours a day, 300 days a year, specifically touching. It's like anything in life. You get a hairdresser, she's so good at what she does because she does it every day. She knows exactly what cutting shears to use. She knows how long the client wants their hair, and you become masterful. Like an orthopedic surgeon has so many techniques available, but he or she will also have the tools that will tell them exactly where the problem is. And chiropractic is now entering into this new era, and it's so exciting because they used to say, well, how do you know? And it's hard to share with someone how you know because you touch it every single day, all the time. And
I used to get into problems with neuroscience reviewers or editors of journals because they would literally write back to me and say, I don't believe you can palpate dysfunction in the spine, like as in we could pick it up with our fingers. And I'm going, what? This is the third largest health profession on the planet, and you don't believe we can do what we do all day, every day? But this is where the beauty lies. But I don't see machines taking over but I think it could be a very powerful tool, Sherry, to help identify where there's real problems within the spine. That's, where there's, because if you've got all of this muscular dysfunction around a particular segment, and it can be picked up on through the high density EMG, for example, and the machine learning software, you can start to identify where problem areas are, and they would have probably built up over a long period of time.
Sure.
And it fits in with the more and more I do this research, the more I believe that our role as chiropractors is actually to exercise the spine back into proper function, to literally identify these dysfunctional parts of the spine and then get them moving again. Like, I wish I could adjust myself, but I can't. Like, it's just, if you click your own spine, you're actually releasing the compensatory segments. We know this. We've seen this. So you actually need the external chiropractor to go and get the movement back into those segments where it's completely dysfunctional. And of course, that's going to take a bit of time. If those little muscles around that segment have atrophied, have become stiff and fibrotic, they've even changed their fiber type from being like a sensor to being like a mover, and then they've stiffened up, and then you've got all this fatty infiltration. It's going to be a bit like going to the gym. You don't get the nice, fit, strong muscles after 1 or 2 sessions. A little bit of repetition is going to be needed. And it fits with what chiropractors find in clinical practice, right?
Heidi, that's one of the pieces when you said that, it stimulated me thinking about as we age, because as we age, we lose muscle mass normally, unless we're actively working at it. And
Yep.
one piece of that is the degeneration that happens with our balance and coordination. And wouldn't this be an
Yes.
exciting tool to be able to not only create opportunity for an aging adult, but to prevent so much of this from happening?
Yes.
I mean, the world becomes so much more open to possibilities.
Well, you get degeneration too within the vestibular apparatus. Your eyesight gets a little worse, and you know that your balance relies on the 3 things. It relies on your vestibular apparatus, your inner ear, to sense balance, which we know degenerates as we age. It relies on your eyesight, which again we know degenerates as you age, and it relies on your proprioception. And what that means, one of the key components of that, is the little stretch signals from the muscles. And that's why your muscles are so important. You need your muscles to move. And what we're now discovering is that the little muscles of the spine, play a really key role in the way your brain interprets the stretch signals or the proprioceptive signals from all your other muscles as well. Because, of course, your arms and legs, where do they attach? Well, they attach to your core, to your spine. So that spine, it's like everything is calibrated according to where the signals that the brain is getting from the spine. And if the spine is just left to rot, and I can't think of better words to say, but people don't take care of their spine. Your spine is literally left to rot. The little muscles, they atrophy, they shrink, they get fatty infiltration. These are maladaptive. These are not good changes at these muscles in the spine. Then they can no longer calibrate for your brain what's going on at that part of the spine. And this can even be detected. So if you don't believe us, believe the machines. This can be detected through the patterns, the electrophysiological signaling of the muscles when you're recording 400 channels over and this was just the back muscles. So we also now can do this in the mid back, and we can also do it in the neck, and we can do it with not just one flexion forward bending movement. We can also look at the side bending and the twisting movements. So it's not going to be far off again until we have got some really powerful tools. See, the other cool end of this too, because we're not just looking at what's happening in the spine, Sherry, we're actually equally, probably even more so, looking at what's happening in the brain. And some really cool research again that we've got several PhD students again that are working with us, and especially on this technological advances. And one area we're looking at is brain age. And where we're working towards on this is to be able to, like any, for example, health practitioner could put this simple little cap on the head. You have some little sponges that you wet in water and stick them in, and you get a few minutes of recordings of brain waves. This is like sort of made easy for clinicians, right? Because we're researchers. We have 64 channels. We scratch the scalp, and we've just about got glue in on 64 little electrodes on the head. But again, Imran is working on this technological advance to make it easy to whip a cap on in practice in the clinic, stick some wet sponges in particular holes on this cap and record a few minutes of brainwaves, resting EEG. And what we're looking at now, Sherry, is looking at brain age. So this again, that brain age. So, for example, we can start looking at, well, how old is your brain according to millions of other brains, right?
Right.
I might be 49, but, if I've really pushed myself and put myself under a lot of trauma and stress, my brain may be signaling that it's 65. That's not good.
Right.
And again, can you reverse that? Yes, you can. You can work at improving that. And we're looking at the moment then the benefits of a whole lot of different interventions, including adjusting the spine. How does that bring the age of the brain back down.
Actually,
so it's like,
and the age is actually more important than the physical age when you think about the brain being
oh yeah,
the top
the
tier
functional age.
program. So, you know, when someone IDs you, you can now say my brain age is only 21, so I'm good.
Yeah. Well, that's the aim, right? That's the aim. But this is where, again, you can use AI because we wouldn't have managed to get, like, we wouldn't manage to get answers in this if we were just doing one study at a time, which is what we've been doing up until, this new technology with artificial intelligence and machine learning. But when you can start to now look at giving it sort of millions of data points and say, can you look for patterns, please? Differentiating these different brains, you will start to get this map of brain degeneration. Like, for example, we know that the brain can get it has normally these nice little pretty maps. They're quite segregated. It knows exactly where your arms and legs are. It knows exactly where it's hearing sound from. It's called sound localization maps, so that your brain can interpret where a sound comes from or where you've been touched on your body. If someone's touched you from behind, you can feel it, you know exactly where they've touched you. These little maps in the body, we know, again, when the spine dysfunctions, Sherry, these maps blur. So it becomes very difficult for the brain to accurately pick up on where's a sound coming from. Even like, how am I interpreting visual information? So we've run these tests where, for example, you get words pop up and it might be written green, but it's in the color red. And so you're meant to say the color that it either is written or the color that you're seeing. So it's, two different ways to try and test how quickly can your brain identify a color or read a word. Does that make sense?
It does.
And you can pick up on, again, the way the brain interprets this kind of information is not as good when the spine isn't functioning well. Like, how fascinating is that? So, like, this is why I call it the secrets of the spine, because I don't think people fully realize yet just how important their spine is. And if they've had an injury, like a year ago, we know this dysfunction happens. This has been shown in many animal models. You can see it in MR scans. You can see that the deep muscles, they've atrophied, full of fatty infiltration. It's quite scary that people don't look after their spines.
It is.
And I'm hoping with time we can change that, Sherry, because I don't want people to have this dysfunction. Imagine then when you're getting to, older age, come full circle again back to the balance. Like, if your eyesight's going, your vestibular system is dysfunctioning, and you have not taken care of your spine, your brain is not accurately aware of where your arms and legs are. Your chances of a fall is like so much higher than if you take care of your spine, get it regularly checked and adjusted, and your brain is more accurately aware of where your arms and legs are. We've even done a study. Kelly Holt, a colleague of mine, he's now become the president of the New Zealand College of Chiropractic, by the way, used to work in the research team with me, but he's so bloody smart that he's now the president, which is wonderful. We love him to be the president. But when he did his PhD, he was looking at this kind of sensory motor function in older adults. And he was looking specifically at sensory motor function that was relevant for falls and balance. And he showed that a 12-week period of chiropractic care had this dramatic improvement in multiple of these sensory motor functions. So, for example, these older adults, so what I'm trying to get at here is, even if you already are over 65, you can change this by going to see a chiropractor who can exercise your spine back into proper function. Because what he found in this randomized control trial, so it was a proper randomized control trial, 12 weeks of chiropractic care, he showed that these older adults, which just means they were older than 65,
right,
that they were better able, and all the chiropractors did, by the way, I think it's quite important to know that, was check and adjust their spines for these dysfunctional segments that we call subluxations. So there was no manipulation of elbows or joints or ankles or anything like that. But so just checking and adjusting spines for 12 weeks, these older adults, their brains were better able to sense and perceive what was going on in their ankle joint. So they were more accurately aware of the ankle joint. They were also able to take a faster step, a compensatory step. So if you're having a slip or a fall, your brain needs to first and foremost pick up on, I'm having a slip or a fall. I need to very quickly decide, okay, I'm falling to the right. I need to get my right foot, put it quickly in front of me so I don't fall over. And we literally tested this ability to take a fast compensatory step. There were no changes, Sherry, at 4 weeks, which I find fascinating. But at 12 weeks of chiropractic care, there was this dramatic difference. And the people that got adjusted versus the control group that didn't get chiropractic care, the people got adjusted were able to take a significantly faster step, compensatory step. So again, it sort of tells me that some of these changes and adaptations that happen within the brain when your spine is being looked after, when you're getting checked and adjusted, it takes time. So these neural adaptations, they take time, which again brings me back to, I reckon chiropractors' role is to exercise the spine back into proper function so their brain can more accurately perceive what's going on and therefore adapt to a challenge better or more accurately.
Is that amazingly incredible? Like I think about just myself getting back into shape, and I've always gone back to one of my high school coaches who said, look, you really want to build strength and cut and be strong. It's going to take you 12 to 18 weeks to get to that point. And here we have, like, I go back to that and think, why 12? Why 12 weeks? And now I'm starting to visualize it's your brain as well as your muscles that are getting impacted, and the small things that make
pathways going again,
yes,
and you need to repeatedly have your brain send those signals to your muscles for them to start actually moving and contracting like they should. And then it does take up to 12 to 18 weeks to get those muscles plumper, moving properly, because again we know that the brain dysfunctions, as in we know that the little muscles closest to the spine, they need to be communicating and stretching to the brain. But we know, Sherry, that stress, so even psychological stress or trauma or physical stress and trauma can turn them back off again and start the dysfunction cycle, which is why I think, because who these days isn't under an incredible amount of stress? And I don't just mean mental stress, but physiological stress, like body stress, the way the brain interprets stress. So I think that's again why it's you repeatedly need to go in and adjust these dysfunctional segments. I look upon them as a bit like the circuit breaker and the fuse box blowing. Mm-hmm. The circuit breaker blow when it's too much going on. And how often do we get into too much going on? In my world, quite often.
Exactly.
So I get adjusted every week. Every single week, I pay for a chiropractor to adjust me. I also pay that chiropractor to adjust my husband and my children every single week, because there's just too many stressors in our daily lives. And there's always some circuit breaker that's blown. And I want my brain to be the most accurately aware of what's going on, because I know the power of our brain to be able to do everything that it does. It needs to know what's going on first. It can't fix a problem it's not aware of.
See, that was where I when I heard you say that, my thought process went, we don't know everything that the brain does. And now we're going to be capturing these fabulous moments. And part of me was thinking, well, if artificial intelligence is so good, is there a place for chiropractic in the future? And what you just said, Heidi, was so exploratory and so fascinating, because you think to yourself, your activities of daily living can be changed by a chiropractic adjustment, because we know now that dysfunctional joints are a global perspective of what's going on around them. Basically, It could be anything from stress relationship. And I love the fuse example, because to me, that's like the 2:00 in my day. It's like, I'm done. I can't take any more.
You hit the wall. That's it.
But now think about this, Heidi, is you start seeing patterns of behavior where all of a sudden we start using other parts of the brain that we haven't actually seen or understood fully. And what does it mean? Because most of the neurophysiologists that are so exceptional academically, like yourself, they're very humble, and they have this opportunity to say, we only know so much, but we
I
can
know.
collect so much information, and then we can establish what is the other 80% of the brain doing? Like, what is it really doing? So tell me your thoughts on the future. Like, where in the future with artificial intelligence, knowing that once we start collecting data and we see patterns that maybe we never thought of before, and you look at the adaptations and the skills that a chiropractor has to help a patient, whether they've been injured or they're suffering from severe depression, right? Because we know that too has the impact, or a degenerating individual who has, they're 75 years old and they've had multiple traumas, and now we're trying to get them back in. Let's now start thinking about the other sides of the brain we may not know about. Tell me what you see as the future of the research that you might be able to work with.
Well, I think it's like you say. I mean, it's a big unknown, Sherry. But with AI, again, what I'm hoping people especially people who are listening, will be interested in doing is taking advantage of this wearable technology that's coming out. Do it. Start using this wearable technology. Because you're collecting that data. Because once we start collecting this data from millions of people who are seeing, thousands of chiropractors or physiotherapists or medical doctors or everything, once we start collecting this data, and this is happening right now, I'll tell you in a minute about an organization that I'm working with in the United States called Chiropractic Future, specifically looking at this. But what we will be able to do is garner that information from your devices, if you want us to, obviously, and no one specifically knows one person, okay? It's the machines. They collect all the data and they start seeing the patterns, Sherry. And it might be that, for a particular person, they would benefit from being seen 3 times a week with this particular chiropractic technique, whereas a different kind of person would benefit from being seen once a week with that kind of technique. And this is where, and then we'll also start to know, well, what are the outcomes?
Sure.
How are we helping people? Because at the moment we've got big surveys, with 25,000 people, and we know that those that see chiropractors, they themselves report that 70% of them, they feel better. They feel like they can cope with their health problems better. So basically their resilience is increased. And I don't know about you, but resilience at the moment for me is massive. And if I can get that out of my one adjustment a week, I am delighted, because it just means I'm coping, right? But we also know that 40% of people sleep better. Even 13% of people, Sherry, under chiropractic care feel like their relationships with others function better. So this, and I'll tell you what, when the authors of this study, it was Adams et al. 2012, they didn't mention that table of outcomes that the patients themselves reported in their discussion. They didn't mention it with a word. And I think, super smart scientists, but I think it was so far-fetched to them. Well, how could adjusting the spine be making people more resilient, sleeping better, and having better interpersonal relationships? How could the spine be related? It's like, I have no idea, so I'm not even going to mention it. They reported the outcomes, but they didn't talk about it. But see, now, since then, we've done that prefrontal cortex study. We can now start to explain. And I think this is where AI will play a real major role in the future, that we'll start to find connections, like when, millions of people get under chiropractic care with thousands of chiropractors, and they're seen at that rate and that rate with this technique and these skills, then these are the actual outcomes that you can get. And again, once people start to see this, like, for example, at the moment, we're doing research looking at whether we improve intelligence in children, because the prefrontal cortex is the seat of your intelligence, Sherry. And I don't know about you, but if chiropractic care is going to help my kids, be the most intelligent that they're capable of being with their own genetic makeup, I'm in. I would love them to have that. And so these are the things in the future that we will know. So just watch this space, because there is so much more that will come out in the future where this is going. And we're specifically doing this right now. We're building one of these, it's actually called practice-based research networks, because we gather the data from actual practicing chiropractors' offices or physios or medical doctors. From any practices, we gather that data. So it's practice-based research networks. But so one arm of that is collecting the data or being able to pull the data, for example, from electronic health records. But then there'll also be apps developed, I guarantee you, so that you, the person yourself, you can also fill in, how do you feel you're getting, what changes are you noticing under your chiropractic care or under your physiotherapy care or under your massage therapy or acupuncture. It doesn't matter what you're doing, but to be able to gather that data from you. And at the moment, I'm working with an organization called Chiropractic Future. It's a group of chiropractors. It's actually all those different state associations in America have kind of joined together and then put together this big strategic plan. So they researched the profession, the stakeholders, what should the future look like? How can we take better care of our patients? How can we get better outcomes for our patients? Put together a strategic plan. And part of that plan, I've somehow, Sherry, managed to volunteer to run the research committee. Don't ask me, because I do not have time for that.
Because you get adjusted once a week. Come on, Heidi.
That'll be it. But one of our main goals, Sherry, is to put together one of these big practice-based research networks. We're working with some really good people. We've interviewed about 17 people that have done something similar in the past, not exactly the same, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We've got some of their brains on board to be part of a advisory panel, so that we, again, don't make mistakes that have been made in the past. We've got a lot of support for this. We've got a tech company that's volunteering to build a lot of this. We're calling it the data lake to begin with, because we're extracting from electronic health records a lot of data. But then we're going to be interviewing the chiropractors, and hopefully in the future, we'll also be starting to collect information from patients themselves from apps. And then it's using AI, Sherry. Then it's using AI.
That's fantastic.
Getting all of this data. And we should be able to start to talk back through the apps again to the people themselves. These are the things that we know from patterns from other people, similar to you, with similar symptoms and issues. This is what we recommend for you. This is what you should be doing. And that, to me, is such an exciting future, so that people don't have to sit and listen to one person's advice anymore. It's like, no, based on millions of people, this is the best thing for you. And hey, along the way, we'll monitor you using objective health data, like from Oura Rings or Fitbits and all these different new wearable technologies. And we'll make sure that your health is getting better if that's what you want. Because, of course, we've got to remember that there are teenagers out there that don't want to listen to us anyway yet. or AI, but as they dysfunction, like as the things that the AI predicts will happens, then they might go, oh, okay, yeah, I better start looking after myself.
That's exactly right. Okay, so I have one last question for you, and this is an intimate question. So you're a neurophysiologist. You've looked at the brain, you've studied the brain, you've been around really bright, intelligent people that have looked at the brain from several different aspects.
Yeah.
What for you, so it's kind of two questions in one. What for you is the most exciting part of the brain? And what is the black box in the brain? What is the thing we really have zero idea about? Because I want the listeners to go away and think, chiropractors have been doing this for 130 years almost. And we've done it through the sense of touch and through the sense of listening. We've changed people's lives. We've changed the way they do things. And now we get to this point where artificial intelligence is going to come in, and we're going to have some more data, more opportunities. But I want to know what part of the brain excites you the most, and what part of the brain is like just so unknown. And it's like those deep creatures in the sea, and you see them as like, whoa, what is that thing on the top of their head for? Right. So Tell me is the last piece, because you're so much fun, and you literally, if you were watching Heidi right now, she's like glowing, because it's like her light switch is turned on. And I just want to end this episode with, what is Heidi's big picture? So tell me those two things.
Well, I've got three. I can't possibly narrow it down. I've got three. There's two that two parts of the brain that I've got a real love affair with at the moment. And mainly, again, Sherry, because I've been following the data, and because I know now that when we adjust these dysfunctional segments of the spine, us chiropractors, we change at least two very important parts of the brain. They're actually on opposite ends. One's behind your forehead and one's at the bottom of the back of your head. So the one behind your forehead is called your prefrontal cortex. And then the part at the back of your brain is called the cerebellum. What's really interesting about both of these is they're called they are what's called multimodal integrators, meaning they integrate many different sensory inputs, right? And then they put it together into these maps that the brain uses to function. So what they really do is they make up your reality, Sherry, that they make you who you are. And the fact that we change these, you literally, by getting your spine checked and adjusted, you become more yourself. Like you become more, because I think we get under so much pressure and stress that we dysfunction and adapt and cope, and more fuses blow. Mm-hmm. And I think you lose who you are. And this is why, like, some people get under chiropractic care and they start to make better choices for themselves. And it's like, well, how could that happen? Well, I can understand it now. But then you're asking me as a neuroscientist as well, there's a part of the brain that's kind of in between two lobes that are sitting on top here called the insular cortex. Now, and it works very much with the anterior cingulate cortex. Now, what they are, because we know as neuroscientists very much about the primary visual cortex and the primary auditory cortex and the somatosensory cortex and the motor cortex. We know those very well, but they're all interpreting external signals from outside of your body. So what you hear and see, from around you, from being touched, and then how you make movements based on that. But what fascinates me about the insular cortex and anterior cingulate cortex is they are the insular cortex is like your sensory cortex for what's going on inside your body. Ooh. And the anterior cingulate has a massive input on how it changes how you control your body. So like how you change your hormones and, your bits and pieces to do with, your blood pressure and your heart rate and your digestion. And so it's like those internal sensory organs. And I suspect that this is also changing because we know we change proprioception in a big way, which is interoception. So interoception just means the way your brain interprets signals from inside your body, like chemical senses and temperature and pain and hormones and emotions and that kind of stuff. So again, I have a little love affair with that. Basically, what I find fascinating is we used to learn these as individual systems. You'd learn about the visual system and the auditory system, but now what's coming out is how important it is, how this is interpreted and put together into your reality. And the fact that the spine changes your reality, that still boggles my mind. And I'm just on a path to try and discover more what this means.
It's so exciting because you think about now.
It's so exciting.
The brain has friendships. And, we're talking about fuses blowing, and it's how one part of the brain has a friendship with the other part. And when there is trauma and they separate, what happens in that friendship gap? And a lot of times in that friendship gap, you get loneliness and depression and sadness, and you don't go out as much. And you really do miss that connection. And then you get adjusted and the friendships come back together again. To me, that's living life. And that's becoming who you really are, is having your system, the genetics you were given, have the best possible outcome, because someone around you, like your mother, your sister, your brother, your friendships, are saying, you don't understand how chiropractic works. But trust me, when I get adjusted, I feel the best I can feel. I'm able to do things that I wasn't willing to or wanting to. Because, I mean, you have elderly people saying, I'd only walk maybe a couple of blocks. And then I started to, after my 12, 13 weeks of chiropractic care, because I knew I needed the care longer, and I followed through. I can now do a 2-mile walk with my dog. I would have never taken my dog with me because that dog could throw me off balance.
The world needs you. Like, I don't think people realize you're here for a reason. And each of us, I mean, I know what it's like to get into depression and feel like, well, the world would be better off without you. But that's not true. Like, the world needs you. They need your gifts and your skills. So I think you kind of owe it to the world to be the best you can be. Optimize your own potential. And I like, think of all your loved ones around you. They deserve to have you functioning at your best, because we all play a role together. And that's what makes up communities, and that's what makes up the world. And if we could each be living to our optimal potential, then I'm convinced the world will be a better place.
Oh, Heidi, I think you can drop the mic right there. I think that we need to end it right there, because that is exactly the message that today was meant to give, which is you may not be a cellular, molecular, microbial biologist or a neurophysiologist, but at the root of it, we're here for connections. We're here for opportunity to be the best. And I hope that Adjusted Reality has brought that to you today. And thank you so much, Dr. Heidi, because you beam beauty in every way, shape, and form. Appreciate you being on this call today.
Thanks, Sherry. I really, really enjoyed it.
I want to thank you for tuning in to Adjusted Reality as we spoke to Dr. Heidi Haavik about the impact of artificial intelligence on today's healthcare system. This podcast was brought to you by the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress. And as a special gift for listening today, you can visit f4cp.org/health to get a copy of our Mind, Body, Spirit ebook, which focuses on many ways to optimize your health and the ones you love without the use of drugs or surgery. Now, do not forget to subscribe, share the podcast with a family member and your friends. That's how we grow, and that's how they start to see the knowledge and the wisdom of what can be your best self. Now, if you're feeling so inspired to learn more about chiropractic, or you'd like to find a doctor of chiropractic that is near you, you can simply visit f4cp.org/find a doctor. We appreciate your support. And as always, we look forward to having you check back in very soon.